Hello to ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alex Mendez. Some people call me Blue Brawl, some people call me Blee, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is that you're here today for a tutorial on controls in Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch. So I have quite a lot of topics to cover, so I'm going to link timestamps to all the different topics in the description, and I'm also going to have a small table of contents to show what each topic is going to cover. Now, I'm going to start by covering the main topics first, such as jumping, shooting, and moving, and then I'm going to move on to the smaller topics, such as, well, adjusting your HUD, adjusting the aspect ratio, the resolution, the textures, anti-aliasing, and all the small little bits that help make the game look a little prettier and a little more bearable. So, to get started, we're first going to talk about movement. So, the most important controls in this game are moving and jumping. Like any other shooter on the PC, you can usually move with the WASD keys and jump with the spacebar key. So W moves forward, A moves to the left, S moves backwards, and D moves to the right. WASD. Now you might be asking yourself though, maybe you feel more comfortable with different keys for movement, and maybe you feel a little more comfortable with different keys for jumping. In which case, you ask yourself, how do you control the controls? Well, in Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch, it's quite simple. You're going to start by hitting the escape key on your keyboard, and then using the arrow keys to look for the options section. Hit enter to enter this section, and then look for the section called Customize Controls. Hit enter again, and you'll be taken to a menu that shows all the controls for this game. So we're going to focus mostly on the basic controls right now, and as you can see, I got move forward bound to the W key, move backward bound to the S key, move left to bound to the A key, and move right bound to the D key. If I wanted to change these controls, what I could do is use the arrow keys again to navigate to the option I want to change, hit enter, and then select a key for that control. So now as you can see, move forward can be done by using the W key or the up arrow key on my keyboard. Same deal with moving backward, scroll down, enter, down arrow, scroll down, enter, left arrow for moving left, scroll down, enter, right arrow for moving right. And if I wanted to clear these binds, all I have to do is again navigate to the control I want to clear and hit the backspace key, like so. And that automatically clears all the binds. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the backspace key for all these controls. And again, enter, W, scroll, enter, A, oops, my bad. Hit backspace again. Enter, S to move backward, A to move left, and D to move right. So just like that, I have my controls. So, when it comes to jumping, jumping is usually done with a spacebar, and you can usually perform one of two kinds of jumps. The short jump, which is done just by tapping the spacebar, and the long jump, which is done by holding the jump button. So I'm going to jump down here, give a quick example. So with short jumps, you can climb up these ledges, which are actually 32 pixels in height, like so. With the long jump, you can actually jump onto these ledges, which are 64 pixels in height. Now, if I wanted to, I could try to jump up to this ledge, but it's too tall for my character to jump onto. However, if I were to use a technique called jump boosting, I would be able to clear this ledge. This ledge. And jump boosting in this game basically consists of jumping onto one ledge and then quickly jumping onto another. This is done by holding down the jump key as you approach the first ledge. So as you can see, I'm going to run up. And just like that, I managed to clear 96 pixels with a single jump. Just the same, it's possible to move a little faster by holding the forward and side key, to run diagonally. This is called SR40 in Xandronum, and it provides a small speed boost to people who want to cover more ground or jump farther. So as a quick example, by strafe running and jumping, I can cover a little bit more height than before. Well, not a little bit more height, but a little more distance. And this allows me to make a shortcut out of this path right here, where I can strafe run and strafe jump to get onto this ledge. It's a pretty cool shortcut. So when I mentioned earlier that jumping and moving were the most important parts of the game, I obviously forgot to include looking and shooting. So looking in this game is done with the mouse, and there's plenty of settings available to adjust the way that you look around. So to do this, we're going to be going into the options menu again, and this time we're going to be talking about the section called mouse options. So the options up here are basically menu settings for using the mouse to look through the menu. So enable mouse in menu, sure. Enable mouse in menus. You make a touchscreen light, yes, no. Show the back button, which should usually be in the upper left corner, but isn't, I guess. And then setting the cursor, which basically lets you adjust the shape of your cursor. So I can make it default, I can make a simple arrow, or I can go through check, strife, hexen, heretic, and other simple options. I like to keep it at default because I don't tend to use the mouse for the menu. The most important thing we're going to be looking at here is mouse sensitivity. So mouse sensitivity basically takes your general movement of your mouse and amplifies it by a multiplier so that you can look around faster or slower than normal. So at 1.0 it's basically default move speed for your mouse, and then at higher sensitivities your mouse moves faster but you tend to lose precision as a result. At lower mouse sensitivities you gain precision but it becomes harder to look around. So for example, I'm going to set the mouse sensitivity to 2, and now my mouse moves twice as fast as normal, which means I can look around twice as fast as normal. But in order for me to make those precision shots, it's a little hard. So if I wanted to look down this hallway, for example, even the tiniest movements of my mouse cause me to move several pixels. So if I wanted more precise movement, I could set the overall sensitivity down to around 0.5. And when I escape the menu and go back here, we can see that it's a little easier for me to move the mouse around and make those little micro adjustments for my shots. But again, if I wanted to look around, I have to move the mouse practically twice as much as usual in order to go from left to right. Now, of course, you don't just look left or right, you look in all sorts of directions. You look up, you look down, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You can adjust exactly how fast you look up and down by using the turning speed, and Mouselook speed options here to adjust how sensitive you want the mouse to move in accordance to mouse direction. So if I wanted to move from left to right a little more slowly, I could set the turning speed multiplier to 0.6. So when I look from left to right, it's a little slower, but looking up and down tends to be done at normal speeds. Now if I were to invert this, set this back to 1.6, and set the Mouselook speed down to 0.6, what you can see is I can look around from left to right fairly quickly, but looking up and down tends to be done a little more slowly. Again, play with the best settings, but generally what I recommend is setting Mouselook and turning speed to the same value, and then only adjusting the overall sensitivity and the DPI of your mouse, so that you get the right combination, or right level of precision. There's a tutorial on DPI that I will link in the description, but now the last thing I want to mention is Invert mouse, which means if you turn this option on, you can move the mouse down to look up and move the mouse up to look down. Now looking left and right will still be the same, but I get that some people would prefer to move the mouse down and feel like they're piloting a plane. Maybe useful for classes such as Gyro Man, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. The last other option I wanted to mention was the option of Autoaim, which can be found not in the options menu, but in the player setup menu. Now Autoaim in this game basically adjusts the height of your projectiles so that it helps you look down or aim down and up a little faster. So when I set Autoaim to always, and I add a bot to the game, what this should do in theory is that it should basically move the projectiles up and down and make those adjustments for me so that I don't have to make super accurate shots. Now the drawback to this is that as a result of the mouse controlling my movement, I can't exactly lead my shots. So I'm going to look for the bot here, and I'm also going to look for the rebound striker to show what I'm talking about. Now you can see I'm aiming up a little higher than normal, but because Autoaim is on, it's basically adjusting the height of the shot so that it's going straight toward base.
Don't disappoint me.
I tend to keep this at never though, because again, I want to have full control of where my shots go. And if you want to have full control of shots where your shots go, I would recommend the same thing. But it's never a bad thing to ask for a little help in the game. So now that we've covered most of the looking options, we can move on to the next topic, which is weapons. So Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch has pretty much every weapon from the classic Mega Man series, and that is a lot of weapons to scroll through, and a lot of different weapons to learn. Generally, most weapons can be activated just by clicking the left mouse button, or the Mainfire button, such as Silver Tomahawk and the Mega Buster. Other weapons require charging, while other weapons require extra actions, such as Topspin, which requires me to actually jump from a specific height, well, not jump from a specific height, but be in the air in order to activate, and also requires me to hold down the mouse button to continue spinning. Now, I'm not going to go over every single weapon and its purpose, but rather I'm just going to go over how to scroll through every weapon so that you pick the right tool for the right situation you're in. So, I'm going to go in the console real quick, I'm going to type the give all command, it's going to give me all the weapons and items in the game. And real quick, I'm going to show you what it's like to scroll through the weapon using the mouse wheel. So as you can see, I can go through a lot of weapons very quickly, but if I wanted to pick a specific weapon, I would have to scroll through the entire list in order to find exactly what I'm looking for. And this can get very tedious. So, aside from using the mouse wheel to scroll through weapons, I can also use the number keys on my keypad or on my keyboard to determine which type of weapon I need. Thankfully, in Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch, each weapon in the game is assigned a specific slot based on its type. So busters, such as Proto Buster and Base Buster, are located on the 1 key. And so what I can do is press the 1 key on my keyboard, and it will automatically toggle through different types of busters in the game. Now, like I said before, some weapons require charging, and this is done again by holding the mouse button until the weapon is fully charged, and then releasing the mouse button to fire my projectile. So if I press the M1 button again, I can continue scrolling, and I have Base Proto Buster now, and then I can switch back to the Mega Buster. Now, for ranged weapons, you can hit the 2 button on your keyboard, and this will take you through all the weapons that can basically go a long distance. So Mega Ball and Magna Missile are just a couple of examples. For rapid weapons, or weapons that have a large rate of fast rate of fire, you can press the 3 key, and this will take you through weapons such as Plug Ball and Water Balloon, which can fire very quickly without needing to constantly click the mouse button. Now, for close range weapons, you can hit the 4 button on your keyboard, and this will take you through weapons that are quite strong but have a fairly limited range. So Sakuragane, Thunderclaw, Slash Claw, Flame Sword, you get the idea. For powerful weapons or explosive weapons, I can hit the 5 button on my keyboard, and this will take me through some of the explosive weapons that can deal pretty good damage. So Ballycrapper was an example, Commando Bomb's another example, and Drill Bomb is a pretty famous example of a power weapon. So, say for example, I'm in the middle of a firefight, there's a lot of people surrounding me, and I think to myself, I need a weapon that could take down a lot of targets at once. For that, there's area of effect weapons, which can be accessed with the 6 key. So weapons like Time Stopper, weapons like Lightning Bolt, and weapons like Astro Crush can affect a large area around you and deal a lot of damage, or provide a lot of utility. And then finally, we have the shield weapons, which can be accessed by hitting the 7 button on the keyboard and take you through the different shield weapons such as Skull Barrier and Plant Barrier and Black Hole, and even Mirror Buster, so that you can protect yourself in the middle of a firefight. If you don't feel comfortable with these weapon slots being spread out across the keyboard, what you can do is you can go to the options menu again, and we're going to go to Customize Controls, and we're going to move down the list of controls until we get to the weapon section right here. And you can see there are binds for getting to the next weapon, getting to the previous weapon, and the different weapon slots. So just a quick example here, if I wanted to use mouse wheel down to scroll to the next weapon, again, hit enter and scroll my mouse wheel down to bind the action to the keyboard. So again, same deal, previous weapon, mouse wheel up, and weapon slot 1, 2, 3, 4 through 0 basically, is assigned to a different number on the keyboard. But since there's only 7 important weapon slots in the game, you could probably think of a better place to put them, so that if you were in a tight bind, for example, you could probably press the C key to access the power weapons and get a fast shot off. But I prefer to use a mouse wheel instead, because there are rarely situations in which you're going to be using a bunch of different weapons at the same time. Still, for the campaign for example, it would be a good thing to use. So this brings me to the next point, which is on top of all the weapons that Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch has, there's a lot of items, which means it's important to know how to use your inventory. So again, options, customize controls. We're going to go down to the inventory section, and we can see there's options for using the item, using all items at once, scrolling through the next item, and scrolling through the previous item. So for the sake of this tutorial, I bound next item and previous item to the N Q keys, and I bound the mouse use item to the mouse 3 or middle button mouse on my mouse. Middle button mouse button, or I guess middle mouse button for using items. You get the idea. Anyways, to scroll through the items in the game, I'm going to hit the E button on my keyboard. It's going to take me through the different items I can use. And then of course, to use the item, say like I want to use the W tank to replenish my ammo, I can just use the middle mouse button and it activates the item to refill my ammo. And I can keep doing this until I've run out of W tanks. So if I wanted to run around hunking people all day with Star Crash, I can do that. But that gets boring very quickly. So, if you wanted to bind your items to something else, what you can do is again, go into the options menu, go to customize control, and look for the inventory section. Now, I generally don't have items for, well, I don't have buttons for dropping items or dropping weapons, because again, you want to hold on to those items if you want to, use them. Although it might be useful in team modes where you need to give a weapon to a friend and they are not nearby, or they're not near the weapon or not able to access it. So that's pretty much all the weapons and items controls that you'll need to know for the game. So now we can move on to video settings. So when it comes to video settings in Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch, most of the video settings are related to resolution and renderer. Although there are also a few settings to adjust the way the textures look, and even how some of the sprites look. So to begin changing the way the resolution looks, we'll be going to the options menu again, and this time we're going to be looking for the section called Set Video Mode. Once you enter the section, you'll see that there are options for full screen, aspect ratio, render, force aspect ratio, and enable 5:4 aspect ratio. So you can leave this as on, and what it will do is it basically give you a new option here in the aspect ratio section of 5:4. There's also options for 4:3, all aspect ratios, 17:10, 16:10, 16:9. And in each of these sections, there's different resolutions, ranging from something as small as 640x480 to something as large as 4K. I prefer to keep my resolution 1920x1080. Some people might prefer to keep the resolution smaller, so that the game is easier to run. And this brings us to the next option, which is the renderer. Software renderer is recommended for people with low-end PCs because it's a lot easier to render the game in software than it is in OpenGL. However, software comes with visual bugs and other options missing from the OpenGL renderer. OpenGL is, I would say, the most recommended renderer in the game because again, it provides less visual bugs and more visual options to change the way the game looks. Now when it comes to force aspect ratio, you can set the game to look like a 4:3 aspect ratio game. You can also set it to 16:9, 17:10, 16:10, and 5:4. Although I prefer to keep force aspect ratio off because I don't want the screen to look squished or compressed. So when it comes to changing resolutions, all you have to do is select the aspect ratio you want, and then scroll down to the resolution you want, and then hit the enter key to set. There's also an option to test the resolution by hitting the T button once you've hovered your key over the, or not your key, but your arrow over the desired resolution. Now I'm going to keep everything the same here at 1920 by 1080p. And I'm going to keep full screen off because, again, I don't need to render the game all over my monitor. Although, again, if you are having performance issues, it is recommended to run the game in software mode with full screen set to yes. Just be aware, again, of the visual bugs that you will have to endure. Okay, so like I mentioned before, OpenGL does come with a few extra visual options, and they can be found in the display options section right above. So I'm going to go to display options, OpenGL options, and I'm going to go skip the dynamic light options because lighting in Mega Man 8-bit Deathmatch is very consistent, and instead go straight to the texture options. Now, as you can see, there's an option to enable or disable the textures. Setting this option to no just produces a white screen, so it's best to keep it at yes. Now, texture filter mode and anisotropic filter settings are basically used to help reduce the amount of jaggies in the game. And this is done either by applying a filter to each texture or by smoothing out tiles from a distance. So as you can see, with the texture filter mode set to none, everything in the far distances looks a lot more pixelated. But by setting the texture filter mode to none nearest map, you can see that some of the textures in the background start to smoothen out a little bit. The amount of smoothness depends on the anisotropic filter applied. So 2x smoothens out some of the textures in the background, whereas 16x smoothens out everything in the background that you can see on the right side of the screen. So I'm going to go over anisotropic filter off, 2x, 4x, 8x, and finally 16x. When it comes to texture format, RGBA8 is probably the best setting because it's the most accurate color setting in the game. There are also other options for RGB5A1, RGBA4, RGBA2, and COM compressed RGBA. But again, I prefer to keep it simply at RGBA8 because it shows you exactly what the textures are supposed to look like. Now, enabling high-res textures isn't really necessary because, again, most of the textures in this game are very small pixelated blocks. But say you're running a Doom 2 mod or running another game entirely on the Xandron engine, then this option will become useful. Again, there's the option to resize textures, resize sprites, resize fonts, and pre-catch GL textures so that you don't have to spend too long rendering textures in the game. Camera textures off screen and trim sprite edges are not too relevant because, again, everything in Mega Man 8-bit Deathmatch isn't really that complex in detail. But the options are there if you need to choose. Now again, we go into OpenGL preferences, and we can see that there's also sections for rendering quality and use of models. So to give you an example of what use of models would be good for, I'm going to walk over to the section which has the Nitro button. There we go. I'm going to go back into options, display options, OpenGL options, preferences. And you see, when I set use models to off, it automatically removes any use of voxels in the game and replaces it with sprites, assuming the modder included sprites for their model. Otherwise, it renders a voxel model as is in the game. Now, some people have preferences for voxels, some people don't. Voxels, again, have a significant impact on performance, so if you want to keep your game running as fast as possible, it's usually recommended to keep models off. Same deal can be said with rendering quality. If some people prefer to keep the rendering quality at speed, it means the game can run a little faster, whereas changing it to quality ensures the best visual look, but does not guarantee the best frame rate. So again, I like to use speed because I like to get a good balance of speed and visual fidelity. The only other thing I would mention here in this section is the sprite billboard. So again, I'm going to keep the models off, and then I'm going to keep the sprite billboard on the XY axis. And what will happen, as you can see here, is that sprites that normally would flatten out as you get right above them actually render quite normally. So let's see here. As you can see, once I set the sprite billboard to the y-axis, you can see that this sprite right here starts to flatten out as you approach it and loom over it, to the point it becomes invisible. And the thing can be set to most other items in the game, or most other sprites in the game. So if you prefer to know what you're stepping on, it's usually recommended to keep the sprite billboard option set to XY axis. It's not going to have any impact on performance, you'll be fine. Every other option in this game is not too relevant to Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch, but again, you can learn this on your own time. There is a ZDoom wiki, or not a ZDoom wiki, but a Zandrone wiki that goes over some of these options. And I'll link that in the description later. So, the only other thing I want to show related to visuals is the option to control your HUD. So controlling your HUD, or heads-up display in this game, is done by going into display options, and then going into not dynamic light options. Actually, sorry, it's not in any of those sections. I just remembered it was actually in the advanced options section under HUD options. So here you can set the type of crosshair you want to use, whether it's an X, a circle, an angle, a triangle, or dot. And then you can also set it to grow crosshair when picking up items, and set the crosshair color. Now, there's also an option to set the crosshair color based on health, so that it would be green at full health and red at low health, but I prefer to keep that off. And then here in this section, I can use the Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch palette to select the color of the palette I want to use. So again, use the arrow keys to select the color, hit enter, and then escape to set that option. And then one more thing you could do is set scale crosshair to on, so that regardless of what resolution you're using, the crosshair will always take up the same amount of screen space. Now there's also options for voting display and full screen HUD, but we're not going to get onto that. We just prefer to keep everything simple. Drawing co-op info could be useful for people who want to know what their allies are up to. You can toggle it off if it's taking up too much screen space. Display name tags, again, same deal. If it's taking up too much screen space, you can set that to off, and same deal with frag messages. But since I'm running the game at 1920 by 1080p, these messages don't tend to take up a whole lot of screen space, so I'm more than fine to continue setting these to yes. So that's pretty much it for texture and display options. So now I'm going to be talking about sound options. So when it comes to sound volumes in this game, most of the options can be found in the sound options menu. So we're going to go to sound options, and we're going to see 4 bars here indicating sounds volume, menu volume, music volume, and announcer volume. So the most important ones are these 3 here. Sounds volume basically controls the sounds of the game. Everything from projectiles to props to the sound you make when you land on the ground after jumping in the air. Everything is controlled by this single bar right here, and if I move this bar to the right, the sounds become louder. So as an example, I can set this to 1.0, and it becomes much easier to hear the fireballs in the background. But if I set this down to 0.1, it becomes nearly impossible to hear the fireballs. So it's usually recommended to keep this at a reasonable level, reasonably high level, so that you can pick up on all the audio cues in the video game. Stuff like charging projectiles, stuff like hazards, all that sort of stuff tends to rely on audio cues. So the higher you keep this, the more easier it is to pick up. Menu volume is very simple. It just shows or basically controls the sound of the bleeps and bloops you make every time you change a control in the game. So by setting it to 0.0, or all the way to 0.0, sorry, you can hear no sounds being made as I navigate through the menu. But if I set this up to 1.0, all the sounds become louder. So again, if you don't like hearing the bleeps and bloops over and over, it's usually recommended to keep this either at 0 or at a relatively low volume. Now music, of course, is the control for music. So by setting it to 0.0, the music is shut off. And then by setting it to a higher value, the music begins, overpowering pretty much every other sound in the game. So as a quick example, and you notice that you could barely hear the fireballs in the background, and that's because the music was louder than the fireballs. So again, if you prefer to pick up on the audio cues in the game, it's recommended to keep the music volume low, but if you really like the music that you're listening to, go ahead and set it as high as you want. It doesn't matter. So announcer volume is only relevant if you have an announcer set up in the options menu. So there's just usually two options. There's a default announcer and there's no announcer. And I like to keep it at no announcer because, again, the default announcer doesn't really work. And having no announcer basically means you can focus more on the video game and not have to worry about other messages interrupting your gameplay, such as 3 frags remain or 2 frags remain. Like those sorts of messages, I prefer to filter out and so that I can focus more on what's happening on screen. So the underwater sections and randomized pitches, these options aren't too relevant. I'm just going to go over the output system real quick and talk about, the different options for outputting sound in the game. So the output system option lets you use different sound systems for outputting the sounds in the game. Keeping it at default is simple, is recommended. But if you want to experiment with different styles of output sound, then you could try ASIO, Waveout, OpenGL, or Direct Sound. And then once you've made your changes, you can restart sound by going up to this section and then hitting enter. And this restarts the sound system, and as you can hear, there's not too much of a change in the way the game sounds. And that makes sense because most of the sounds are 8-bit bleeps and bloops. They don't really need a whole lot of audio fidelity, or you don't really need to control the audio system to get the most out of these sounds. So I'm just going to keep it back to default, and I'm going to restart sound again. And again, pretty much sounds the same as before. The only real option I would recommend looking at is the output format. So Xandrodome lets you output sounds in 8-bit format, 16-bit, 24-bit, 32-bit, and 32-bit flow. So it goes from lowest quality to highest quality very quickly. Now, for most sounds in the game, 16-bit is more than enough. But if you have a nice sound card and you want to hear sounds more clearly, then toggling this up to 32-bit float, again, won't have much of a difference in Mega Man 8-bit Deathmatch, but could have a difference in other Doom 2 mods. Same deal with speaker mode. You can select auto to basically have it default to whatever sound system works for your computer, or you can toggle it yourself to go between mono sound, stereo sound, Dolby sound, quad speaker sound, 5 speaker sound, or 5.7 and 7.1 speakers. But again, for most people playing on their computer, stereo will work. And if you want that true classic Mega Man series sound, then setting this speaker mode to mono will only output a single channel. So as you can hear in the background, most of the sound is now focused on the center. And then if I were to set this to stereo and restart sound, the sound is a little more spread out. But again, I don't tend to worry too much about this, so I just like to keep it at speaker mode auto and output format at 32-bit. And again, barely much of a difference can be heard, so you don't have to worry too much about it in the future. Okay, so with most of these sound options covered, we can now move on to player setup. So when it comes to player setup, most of the options can be found in the player setup section. So again, entering here, we're greeted with options to change the name, change the class, change the skin, change the gender, change Autoaim, and toggle always run on or off. So again, name can be changed by hitting enter, and then going ahead and typing your name here. So QWERTY, quick example. If you want to add colors into your name, you'll need to use the backslash and then the C key and then a color key. So in my case, H would be blue, and then I can type out everything afterwards to show up like that. And then if I want to add more characters or more colors, I just repeat the process, backslash C, and then a color letter. So CN would be for light blue, and then everything after that shows up as light blue letters. Now there's also different colors you could use. I'm going to try and display a graphic real quick showing all the different colors that can be used for changing your name. And this allows you to customize the colors in your name so that you can look as stylish as you want to when you join a server. So, class, it's not too relevant, at least for Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch. If you are playing classes mods, this is where you would go to help change your classes. Alternatively, what you could do is open up the console with the tilde key and type out the command player class, whichever. So if I wanted a player class Airman, I could do just that. But because I do not have the classes mod loaded, it's always going to default to class Mega Man. Skin allows me to pick a different skin from pretty much the entire classic Mega Man roster. So if I wanted to look like Heat Man or Alien, or Woodman or Needleman or Magnet Man, as I was playing, I could change the skin through here. Again, same deal as with the player class. If I wanted to change the skin very quickly, again, I could go to the console, type in the command skin, and then the name of the skin in the console. And as you can see, when I go back, whoops, it turns out there's no Dr. Wily skin. That's my mistake. Let me change the skin real quick to Airman. There we go. I've defaulted back to Airman. If you want to install custom skins while playing, there should be a tutorial for that in the description that talks about installing skins, and there's also a tutorial inside the Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch install folder. Just note though that in order for other people to see your skins, they must have the custom skin installed as well. Otherwise, you will show up as Maestro in multiplayer games. So it's usually recommended to stick to the vanilla skins, such as, say, Napalm Man, Crystal Man, or Dark Man, so that everyone can see what your favorite character is. And then, of course, there's gender, so if you're male, female, or other, you can set it through here. And I think I've already talked about Autoaim, but again, I like to set it to never so that I have full control over where my shots go. And I always set this to always run so that you're always running while playing. I've seen cases where people actually don't have this on, and they run very, very slowly as a result, and they don't know how to change that. If you do find yourself with this issue, again, hitting the caps lock key should help toggle running on and off. And again, this doesn't really have much of a use in the game, but it's always recommended to keep it on. Turn it off, you can barely run. If you turn it on, you're always running, and that's good. Last thing to cover would be the weapon setup section. Basically, whenever you pick up a weapon, it'll always give you the option to switch on pickup, and then switch without ammo. And then if you're using a railgun weapon, it'll even let you pick the color of the railgun laser as it fires. But since Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch doesn't really have any railguns, this option becomes moot. Now you also see a list for a preferred weapon order. And this basically allows you to switch weapons based on which ones you like to use most. So if I wanted to use, say, Flame Attack or Base Buster a lot, what should happen here is that I can give this a higher weight. And then for Flame Blast in the background, I can try and look for that weapon and set it to, yep, a weight of 10.0. And so, as soon as I pick up Flame Blast up here, it should automatically switch to that weapon. Let me go ahead and show Metal Blade, Commando Bomb, and then finally Oh, it turns out I already had that weapon picked up. My mistake. But you get the idea. I like to keep this off because, again, I like to have full control over what weapons I want to use at the moment. And if I accidentally walk over a weapon that I don't really want to use at that particular moment, that could lead to a very messy firefight. So keeping this to never is my recommendation. And again, I did go over how to use the scroll wheel to switch between weapons, and also using the numbers to switch between the type of weapon you want to use. So again, timestamp for that should be in the description if you wanted to try that yourself. Alright, so with player setup out of the way, I think now would be a good time to go over other small tidbits, tips, and tricks for making your game run a little more smoothly. So the last section of the video is going to be going over several topics that really don't deserve their own section, but are still pretty useful to know. So one thing I did want to talk about was the console, which can be accessed by hitting the tilt key on your keyboard, and here it'll show a command prompt showing the different log of messages that have been produced. So you can see through the log that I called a vote to change the map to Mega Man v Mars, and then I picked up a few items. So if you ever miss any messages that people are typing at you, you can always open up the console and see what messages were sent. So in this case, I could say, hi. And then if we go back to the console, you can see the message that is there in the console log. We can also use the console for issuing commands, such as say, hi. And I say hi again through the console, which is pretty cool. There's also another massive list of commands I could go over, but I'll just link that in the description and ask that you play with it whenever you can find the time. What I do want to show, though, is the ability to make chat macros or make your own binds for different commands. So to do that, we're going to issue the command chat_substitution1. And what that's going to do is it essentially allows me to replace all instances of stuff like $health, $ammo, and $weapon with the correct values. So you can see here, it shows I have 100 HP, I am using junk shield ammo, and I currently have the junk shield weapon equipped, which is pretty cool. Now if I want to show people what I have, or if I want to add colors, then what I can do is I can start by typing out a bind command. It'll ask me for a letter, so I'll give it the letter L, and then if I hit enter now, it'll show what bind I'm already using. So we can see I've already set up a command to show that I have this much health and that I'm using a mixture of light blue and red text to display the message. So if I want to make something different, I'm going to start again by typing out the command bind, select the key, and then type out the whole command. So I want to say, and then say it with light blue text. You'll notice I'm using double backslashes here. That's because the game will automatically remove the first backslash when you're typing out your command. Say hello, I have double backslash CG for red text, $health, space, double backslash, and this time go back to light blue text, HB, and am using the double backslash red text weapon. And then when I close it all out with parentheses and hit enter, it will change the L bind to say my new message, which is hello, I have health HP, and then using the weapon. So when I leave the console and type, just press the L key, it'll show that, yep, I have 100 HP and I'm using the junk shield weapon. And again, this message is recorded in the console log so that other people can see if they want to. Again, like I mentioned before, I did call a vote for a map change through the console, but I can also do that using the menu in the multiplayer. So again, I'm going to hit escape, bring up the main menu, and I'm going to go down to the multiplayer section. So there are options for offline skirmishing, network changes, player setup, and logging in, but we're not going to go over those changes. If you want to spectate from the current match, you could do so by, hitting spectate there. And then if I want to switch teams, well, it would only work in a team game mode, but you get the idea. This can help with reducing stacking in multiplayer matches by switching between light and wily, or switching from wily to light. And if I want to disconnect, which I don't really want to do right now, or actually, yeah, I'll do it anyway. I'll just hit the enter on the disconnect command, and then type out the command reconnect in the console to reconnect to that server. And just like that, I'm back in the match. So here we go, calling a vote. To call a vote, again, we're going to enter the call vote section, and here we're presented with 3 options. Kick a player who is being extremely aggressive or toxic and harassing multiple people and just being overall being a plague on the server. We can issue a start a vote to kick that player for say 10 minutes, and then start a reason to kick that player and then execute the vote. If we wanted to just change the map, we could do the same thing here. We can go into the change map section and use the arrow keys to select which map we want to go to. So if I wanted to go to Oil Man, I could do that like through this menu. And then intermission basically says if you want to have an intermission screen between map changes, it's usually recommended to have it at yes. And then also entering a reason for the change, because I like oil, smile, and then issuing the command to call the vote. But since I already called the map vote earlier, I have to wait another 3 minutes, or I have to wait 10 minutes total before I can call another vote. So we can get back to that later. And then last vote you can call is to change a limit. So if I wanted to change the limit of frag limit from say 0 to 25 or something similar, I can type out the value, type out the frag limit I want to change, and then start the vote. Now do note that there are different limits you can change, such as frag limit, time limit, win limit, or duel limit, or even point limit, but for sake of simplicity I'll just change it to frag limit and then start the vote. Now do note in multiplayer, some multiplayer servers, the frag limit is essentially controlled by the server owner, which means you cannot call a vote to change that limit. But that's okay, we're not too worried about that. That was just an example. So, one more thing I wanted to go, well, not one more thing, but another thing I wanted to go over is options specifically for Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch. So again, in the options menu, we can see here, there are sections to talk about displaying the health number, displaying the ammo number, issuing pickup weapon colors, showing basically critical death chips, or basically showing little bits and pieces flying from robots when they get exploded, showing map creator cards in specific places. If you never want to see the map creator card, you can set it to never. If you want to see it all the time, you can set it to maps and bosses. And then CTF objective campus is really useful if you want to know where the flag is. And then of course there's a section for music preferences, because some maps actually have multiple tracks. So if I wanted to hear the PSX version of Tango Man stage, I could set it to PSX or Saturn. Doesn't really matter. Same deal with Anchor. I can use the MM10 version, or I can use the Game Boy version. Punk, MM10 Game Boy, Ballad, MM10 Game Boy. I tend to like the MM10 versions more, so I'm just going to set all these stages to MM10. And then for Tango Man stage, I don't really have any strong preference, so I'll just leave it at random. Now with displaying health number and ammo number, it's pretty useful because again, it'll show up in your HUD to show that you have 27 shots left on Napalm Bomb and 100 HP to work with. And then of course I could pick up an ammo capsule like I just did right now to replenish my ammo. So next thing I want to go over is the Automap or overlay. This is useful if you want to see where you are relative to the rest of the map, so we can see right here through the overlay that I am in the top right corner of the map. But you'll notice that I can't see my character as I'm playing, or I can't see what's ahead of me as I turn on the Automap. So to change this, what I can do is go into the menu, options, display options, not display options, sorry, advanced options, and Automap options section. So map color set, it's not too important. Allow map defined colors, that's not too important either. Customize colors for the Automap can be kind of useful. Customize map controls can be useful when you're looking through the Automap. But again, all I really wanted to show you folks was the option to rotate the Automap and the option to overlay the Automap. So when I set it to overlay plus normal and I set it to rotate, you can see here that the Automap is now overlaid over my regular screen and that it's rotated along with my character's angle or my character's rotation. So if I turn right, the Automap turns to the right. If I turn left, the Automap turns to the left, which is pretty cool. And then if I hit Automap again, it'll basically show me the regular Automap menu. Now again, you have to hit Automap twice to go through those options. So if I just wanted only the overlay, I can set it to overlay only, and then when I go to Automap, it just shows me the Automap. Oops. So here we go. You can also have the option to show item counts, monster counts, secret counts, time elapsed, total time elapsed, secrets on map, map labels, background, keys, trigger lines, and show things to sprites, which again is pretty cool, but is really not needed in Mega Man 8-Bit Deathmatch. It's only if you really use this engine or use Android to play other Doom 2 mods, which again is nice. So having that option or knowing that option's there is good to know. Last thing I wanted to go over is message options, because again I understand that some people do not get the privilege of playing this game at 1920 by 1080p, and so they have a limited amount of screen space to work with. So one thing you could do to reduce the amount of screen space usage is to reduce the maximum message count. So I can have it set to 4, which will mean that I will see 4 messages on the screen at once at any given time, or maximum 4 at least. And then if I want to reduce that amount, I could set the maximum message amount to 1. And then the message duration shows how long that message appears on the screen. So if I wanted to get that message removed off the screen as soon as possible, I can set the message duration to 1. But if I want to read through everything that I see or everything that happens in the game, I can set the message duration up to 10 seconds. The default settings are 3 and 4, and I think they're pretty good, but again, if you want to reduce the amount of spam on your screen, you could set these values as low as you want. And again, there's the option to show obituaries, there's the option to show messages at all, there's the option to scale messages in high resolution mode, and of course show the only important messages, or to show just about everything. And since I have the screen space, I'm fine with everything being shown. There's also the option to center messages and color in messages, and when you do that, you automatically enable these options here, which show that every time I pick up an item, it'll show in red text, obituary show in gold text, critical messages show in gray text, chat messages show in green text, team messages show in brick text, and centered messages show in gold text. Screenshot messages and detailed set messages, again, not too important, but again, if you don't want to be bothered by a bunch of random messages appearing on your screen, it's probably a good idea to turn these messages off. But I keep them on because, again, it's not a huge nuisance. And then, of course, the size of the message also matters. So, if you enable text scaling, it'll allow you to scale the messages, basically, to take up a larger portion of the screen. But setting it off basically means that these messages do not scale at all. And so you can see when I have the scoreboard displayed, the text is super tiny. And again, on large screens, that's kind of a problem. So to fix this, I'm going to enable text scaling, and I'm going to set the virtual width to 960 and the virtual height to 540. And at the bottom half of the menu, you can see what clean text looks like, what unscaled text looks like, and what regular scale text looks like. Now, you might be asking yourself why these values are the ones I'm going with, and that's because 960 is half of 1920, and 540 is a half of 1080. So what these messages are doing, well, the text scaling is doing, is it's pretending that the resolution of the screen is actually 960 by 540 and trying to display them as such, when in reality the resolution is actually 1920 by 1080, so basically I'm making the messages twice as large as normal. And if I wanted to make it 3 times as large, again, do some quick math in my head, what is 1920 by 1920 divided by 3? I'm probably going to be stupid for this, but say 640. And then 1080 divided by 3, 360. And there we go. I've just made the text 3 times as large. And then if I wanted to go to make it 4 times as large again, what's 1920 divided by 4? My brain is working overtime here. But it should be, well, what's my 960 divided by 2? 480. And then what is 1080 divided by 4? Again, I feel stupid for not knowing this off the top of my head. But this is why you stay in school, kids. So you don't end up like me, a Mega Man's player whose brain is absolutely fried. It's simpler to just do 540 divided by 2, which would be 270. And there we go, we just made the text 4 times larger, and I feel like I failed my college professors. Anyways. As it turns out, also, there is actually commands to evaluate these values in through the console. So again, I'm going to go use the eval command, and then I'm going to use the divide sign, and say 1920 by 4 will show me that, yep, I was correct, it is 480. And then if I wanted to, I could use the up arrow key to display the last message and show it's divided by 3, and yep, 640 is correct. Same deal, 1080 divided by 3 is 360, 1080 divided by 4 is 270. So the game can be used kind of as a calculator, but again, it's better to just do the math in your head, because math is really important. Okay, that's pretty much it for the tutorial. There we can see all the messages. If you ever have any more questions, feel free to send me a message or comment on the video. But I really hope that you learned a lot from this game, a lot from this tutorial, and that you have a lot more fun, actually playing the game once all your configuration is finished. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.